Doug, you've been looking at the Bowers Wilkins 700S3 series as a 5.1 package. Obviously, I've looked at this. I've looked at the 705, the smallest, the largest of the stand mounts, as a stereo review. So I have some inkling on this. But you, going back to what you were saying earlier, in terms of our reviewing not necessarily being automatically knowing how something is out of the box, this wasn't an immediate. These didn't immediately blow you away. No,
they didn't. And I was actually very conscious of the fact that you had reviewed the 705s. I knew you'd probably read my review, and you're such an astute reviewer. I thought you might point out there was something wrong with my ears.
I wouldn't go that far.
If I didn't like them. But I certainly at first I didn't. Well, I should start by saying what I reviewed. So it was the 702s, which are the floor standards, which are the top end of the new 700 series. And they're beautiful. They're huge things. And they come on plinths, and they're essentially, as is the whole 700 series, sort of mini 800 series. So they benefit from a lot of trickle-down technology from the 800 series. So it has the sort of distinctive tweeter on top arrangement, where the tweeter's sort of housed in it's a carbon dome tweeter housed in an aluminium sort of special housing that sits on the top of the cabinet, and is entirely decoupled from the cabinet. What else has it got in there from the 800 series? The continuum cones with decoupled mid-range drivers that sit in little pods, which are very interesting things. There's a picture and description in the review, and you can sort of press the outer ring of the pod where the mid-range driver sits, and it flexes ever so slightly, such as it's decoupling from the cabinet. So it was the 702, the HTM 71 center, which is a three-way center with all that tech that I just described, and the 705s that Ed reviewed as surrounds, which are sort of ludicrously over-specified surround speakers, really, and then a 10-inch DB4S subwoofer, which I'll come on to. I absolutely adored. Really enjoyed that. So yeah, it's essentially mini 800 series. So I went into the review thinking, well, these are going to be phenomenal. Sort of set them up as I usually do in my room, and sort of angled them all very precisely on axis to where I sit. And the way I'd normally start testing is I don't run any sort of calibration, and I usually just listen to the front two in stereo, just uncalibrated, just so that I can kind of get a sense of where their natural tone is, their kind of natural voice. And I got through maybe sort of half an hour's listening, and I really wasn't sold at first at all. It took me a long time to acclimatize to them. And initially, I essentially felt that they had slightly too much upper frequency energy. I wouldn't quite go as far as saying bright, because they weren't, but they did. They sounded like they had a little bit almost artificial air about them. So I attempted to toe them out ever so slightly, which is, you receive wisdom. That's the way. If something's slightly bright, you toe it out ever so slightly, and then you're sitting slightly off axis to them, and you're getting less of that sort of directional high frequency energy. And ever so slightly, I would say that probably 10-20 centimeters to the side of each ear. So it really wasn't very pronounced at all. But once I did that, and once I sat back down and kind of warmed to them a little bit more, I felt like I've found their groove. And once I was in that, I was absolutely sold. Absolutely adored them. And the first night when I was listening to music, I was up till 1 o'clock just going through tracks that I know very well. And there are a couple of tracks that I was playing back over and over again. The Chain Fleetwood Mac is just one that I know inside out, and I listen to very specific points in the track, and there were bits that were just clear as a bell in a way that I had never heard. I won't say I was hearing, new sounds or things that I'd never. Cliche, exactly. it was certainly crystal clear in a way I don't think I've ever heard previously, and I really enjoyed that. I went through the chain maybe 3-4 times. Just I couldn't quite believe it was sounding so different. So that was them in stereo, and then once I'd sort of got to that point where I was thinking, okay, well these are actually something special, because I was convinced it must be hidden there somewhere, given how sort of widely loved the 700 series is. So then I calibrated them with the Trinov and listened to them in multi-channel. I calibrated the sub prior to calibrating in the Trinov using its own app, which is really interesting actually. It's a phone app, and you use your phone's microphone, and you place the phone on top of the sub to start the sort of calibration process, and then you take the phone to where you sit. And I think it did sort of an 8-point measurement. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's in the review. But there was a sort of a stress-free calibration to the whole process, like simplicity to the whole process, that I think made it a bit of a revelation. Usually with subs, you're having to, find there's a sort of an LCD screen on the back of the subwoofer that you have to sort of read upside down, and you're fiddling with PEQ filters to sort of get it calibrated before you run your full calibration. With the Bowers sub, it was just a case of putting my phone on top of it and putting my phone at the listening position.
We've come a long way from stomping around the house,
yes,
stomping around the room with SPL meters,
or crawling around I think it's called the subwoofer crawl, isn't it? Where you're trying to climb.
I don't miss that.
Yes. So that was calibrated at all, sat down, listened to it, and loved it. The slightly sort of accentuated high frequencies weren't a problem at all after the calibration, and particularly after a bit of toe out, which I didn't toe out the surrounds. They were all bang on access, same with the center. But that translated to just this incredibly detailed sound, which is, I definitely probably favor detail in surround mixes more than warmth. I just find it incredibly immersive when you have this incredibly detailed soundscape, and you really got that with the Bowers. And the fact that all of the speakers shared the same sort of driver tech and in identical tweeters all around gave this sort of seamless coherence to the whole presentation, which was wonderful, and I really truly enjoyed it. And that DB4S, once calibrated, was stonkingly good for a 10-inch sub. I mean, I'm speaking as someone who my day-to-day sort of subs are two 18-inch DIY massive pro driver subs, but I didn't feel like I missed a huge amount just running with the 10-inch DB4S. It was ludicrously competent. It weighed a ton as well. I think it's something like under 40 centimeters.
How much is it, Doug?
Oh, I mean, it's in the review. I think it's knocking on $2,000. I think the whole package came in at something like
it was 11,400 for the package, and I know that the 702 takes up the bulk of that. So I was just doing some mental calculations. It can't be. I mean, it's not money. It's not given away, but it does strike me as not unreasonably priced for the level of performance you're ascribing to.
I remember thinking precisely that. I remember thinking this is a real contender of a subwoofer. And the thing is, where is it? Just hang on, it's in the review. 1,600.
There we go. Yeah. That's
so that puts it in, a very competitive place. Actually, its pricing, if you look at what the SVSs of the world are offering at that price point, and the Arendals, you're getting much larger subwoofers. But I don't think Bowers are really trying to compete with them. They're trying to, make something that sounds fantastic, looks great, and is actually relatively discreet. It isn't one of these huge ported monsters. It's something that you can sort of stick in the corner of your room quite happily, and it looks nice. And yeah, it really did sound phenomenal.
Nice.
So overall, I was delighted. I think I gave it highly recommended. It was unusual as a review goes in that I've never taken quite as long
to dial in.
to dial a system in. But once it was there, it sort of paid back that effort.
Have you had much dealings with Bowers Wilkins stuff prior to this point, Doug?
I don't. This is the first time I've ever reviewed them.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you're talking about, because I've done a few over the years. There are certain things I sort of anticipate them doing now, and it's interesting, all the process that you've described subconsciously. In my space, which is relatively well damped, I don't have to toe out. But whereas almost everything else that sits in this listening space has toe in, they point dead ahead. And it's it's something that's sort of done as an automatic thing. And do you know what? It's both interesting and also quite reassuring that your experiences do sort of overlap my own in this one. So yeah. The full review that Doug's written, and it's a damn good review, is up on the site for you to read at leisure. And if you have any specific questions, I'm sure they can be put into the comment section, and someone will come along, either ourselves or someone who is equally well versed in the things, to provide an answer for them.